All right, happy Friday to you. I'm Fox 26 meteorologist Remeisha Shade. It is the end of the work week for many of you, and also time to check out what's happening in the tropics. Things have been fairly quiet for the Houston area for a while. Of course, we've been hit by one hurricane so far this season. That was all the way back in July, and that was Hurricane Beryl. We've had several systems, but they have all been staying away. Now we have finally made it to the beginning of what is the last month of our 2024 Atlantic Basin hurricane season. Typically, that's when things start to kind of wind down, and our chance for any tropical storm or hurricane heading here is extremely low. However, we can't say that we're out of the woods or we're all clear until the very end of the season. So we're still closely monitoring anything that could bubble up out there across the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico. Here is what you need to know as far as what's happening right now. The models are still hinting at some potential tropical development over the next 2 to 7 days, particularly in the North Atlantic and in the Caribbean. There are 3 areas actually that are being monitored across the Atlantic Basin for potential tropical cyclone development, and we could actually have a tropical storm or Hurricane Patty, or maybe a tropical storm or Hurricane Raphael over the next week. Those would be the next 2 names on the list. But before we get to talking about where those could form, let's check out what we've dealt with so far this season. And of course, it's been a busy one. Of course, hurricane season started at the beginning of June, lasts all the way through November 30th. We've reached the final month, but we've already had 15 named storms ranging from Alberto all the way to Oscar. 10 of those named storms became hurricanes, and out of those, 4 became major hurricanes. Of course, a major hurricane is anything category 3 or greater. Those are the ones that can do some big time damage. Even a category 1 can produce widespread wind damage and flooding, as we experienced firsthand here in Houston back on July 8th with Beryl. So it's been a busy season, to say the least. We've still got the potential to add a few more names to this list. Like I said, Patty and Raphael could develop in the next week. In fact, we could have Patty really in the next few hours potentially. This is the system that we're monitoring in the North Atlantic. You could kind of see that swirl there a few seconds ago, that counterclockwise swirl. This is an area of low pressure that's fairly feisty. It's getting more organized. It's way up in the North Atlantic, and it is being called Invest 96L. That means the National Hurricane Center is starting to take a closer look at this system, since it is looking more organized. It's getting a little healthier, and it's getting closer to becoming maybe subtropical or tropical storm Patty. So if this develops, this would be the P storm, which would be Patty, and then we'd move on to Raphael, which could develop in the Caribbean. But this is drifting off to the east. It's a couple hundred miles west of the Azores, so that is where it could be impacting, where there will be the potential for some gusty wind and some heavy rain. Of course, that one is a long ways away from southeast Texas, so we don't have to worry about that one here. Now let's move over to the Caribbean Sea, and that's where we have not 1 but 2 areas of potential tropical cyclone action that we're monitoring. That is where we could have maybe Tropical Storm Raphael. But before we get to that, let me show you exactly the chance for tropical storm formation for Invest 96L, and that is going to be right around a medium 40% chance. But like I said, this is pretty far away from Houston, from the Gulf of Mexico. This is way up in the North Atlantic Ocean, so this one is going to be rolling away from us. These are the 2 systems, though, that we are really keeping a close eye on. 2 areas of disturbed weather in the Caribbean Sea, one with now a high chance for development. This one is going to have the potential for maybe Tropical Storm Raphael to develop over the next week or so. So our tropical satellite will show you that we've got some burst of convection in the northeast Caribbean Sea close to Puerto Rico. We've got some areas of showers and storms in the southwestern Caribbean. That is the area that we are really taking a close look at, because now we've got a higher shot for a tropical cyclone formation in the southwestern Caribbean, and even a low chance with this disturbance up near Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and the Greater Antilles. So we are monitoring both of these systems. Here's the shot for development for our two Caribbean systems. In the northeastern Caribbean, just a very low 10% chance that this area of disturbed weather that you see here near Puerto Rico will have a chance to turn into a tropical system. Like I said, the next two names on the list would be Patty and Raphael, but regardless of tropical cyclone development or not, it's going to continue to drift to the west-northwest and spread some heavy rain over parts of some of those northeastern Caribbean islands like Puerto Rico, like Hispaniola, and eventually maybe over towards Cuba and the southeastern Bahamas. So we'll have to watch that closely to see if it gets any more organized, but right now, chance that it would become our next tropical system is still on the very low side at 10%. The other system in the southwestern Caribbean is highlighted in a different color because it has a high 70% chance for tropical cyclone development over the next week or so. So it is still basically kind of disorganized, meandering off of that east coast of Central America, and it just hasn't really been able to get its act together all week long, but it is still producing bursts of heavy rain and gusty wind at times. And this area highlighted here shows where we could have that potential tropical depression or tropical storm developing over the next week. In fact, the models kind of have it starting to get a little bit more organized as we get into next week. So let me show you what our futurecast is showing for our disturbances in the Caribbean. There are some models that are kind of showing two circulations, but they could kind of combine. But regardless, we will likely have at least one tropical system develop in the Caribbean Sea as we go into early next week. Tuesday morning around 8 to 8:30, there could be a disturbance rolling over parts of Cuba. Maybe a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm. We'll have to wait and see, but definitely something to watch. Notice what happens by Wednesday afternoon. This system, if it develops, could start to try to push into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. That's when you start to say, uh-oh, where is this thing going? Is it going to be heading towards southeast Texas? Well, the answer is most likely not. With the time of the year that it is, the steering currents, the slightly cooler waters, there's only a low chance that it would head our way, but it is very unlikely. Of course, we'll continue to watch it. So in the northern Gulf of Mexico, the water's starting to cool off just a tad, but waters are still very warm across the southern Gulf, much of the Caribbean, and the western and central portions of the Atlantic. So that's why we are still monitoring things closely. We are concerned that, yes, we could still have one or two additional tropical systems mess with us over the next week or so before we can kind of give you that all clear. But we have made it to the month of November, and as I've been telling you day by day, this is usually the time of the hurricane season where things kind of start to wind down. Of course, the peak of hurricane season right around September 10th. By the time we get to the second half of October, usually the chance for tropical storms and hurricanes starts to decrease. By the time we get to November, the chance is even lower. So notice for the Gulf of Mexico, for those formation zones, you don't really see much yellow in there. You don't really see an area highlighted, but notice there is a little spike here of that yellow in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, and that's exactly the area that we will be looking to next week to see if we can get some tropical action going. Also, western central portions of the Caribbean Sea, we're still closely monitoring for that potential November tropical cyclone formation, and the western Atlantic will be a spot to watch as well. Even a few spots in the central Atlantic, so we can't totally rule out a tropical system forming. However, like I said, the chance by the time you get to this time of the year is usually pretty low. So we've made it through the worst of the season. Like I said, that peak in September, things usually start to kind of ramp up as we go through August, September. It's just going crazy. That's the peak, at least historically. But after that second week in October, that's when that tropical development usually starts to decrease. So at this point, still no named storms out there, but in the North Atlantic, we could have tropical storm Patty develop very soon over the next 24 to 48 hours. And in the Caribbean, like I said, we're still monitoring two different areas of disturbed weather, disorganized showers and storms now that could evolve into areas of low pressure over the weekend or next week. So that's why we're thinking there could be a Patty and maybe a tropical storm Rafael over the next 7 days. So of course, we'll continue to monitor it over the weekend into next week, and we will get you through the remainder of hurricane season day by day. Hopefully nothing heading to the Houston area right now. It does not appear that we are in danger of any of these tropical systems hitting us, but of course we will continue to monitor it closely and give you the latest info. All right, well, that will do it for your tropical update for today. I'm Fox 26 meteorologist Remeisha. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend.